It was just past dusk, the kind of quiet hour when the world feels like it's holding its breath. In the small town of Charleston, South Carolina, the streets had started to empty as the workday ended. But inside the bustling resort, all lights were on. It was the soft hum of business, people talking, the clinking of glass, and the distant laughter of guests enjoying their time. Tasha Carter stood at the back of the grand lobby, observing everything as if she were an outsider looking in. Her fingers gently grazed the smooth marble counter, her eyes lingering on the polished floors. She wasn't supposed to be here, not really. A few years ago, she would have been in the back room, scrubbing the floors or taking orders, dressed in the faded uniform of an assistant. The kind of person who was invisible in a place like this. But now, with a single look and the turn of a key, she had the power. The key to it all. She glanced at the staff, polished, immaculate in their tuxedos and designer dresses. They passed her without so much as a second glance. Their laughter felt hollow, like a performance. But it was all she had ever dreamed of, to be one of them. Too dark to be rich, they'd said. She'll never make it. Not with that skin. Her chest tightened with the memory. It wasn't the first time she'd heard it, but it still hurt. No matter how many times she'd gotten into the room, there were whispers, murmurs of doubt behind her back. In the boardrooms, in the back of the restaurant, and even in the streets of Charleston. Tasha was born in the same city she stood in now, but it had never felt like home. She'd grown up on the south side of Charleston, where opportunity was scarce and dreams were often deferred. It was a place where color meant more than you cared to admit, where wealth was a fortress built on the backs of people who looked like her. People like her mother, who worked as a maid at one of these hotels for over 20 years. Tasha had watched it all. Growing up in the shadow of rooms she wasn't allowed to enter. Rooms her mother cleaned, but never lived in. And now, standing in this luxurious space, looking out over the ballroom from her position behind the desk, she knew she had crossed a line. She wasn't the girl who scrubbed toilets anymore. She wasn't just the help. Yet the whispers still haunted her. But tonight would be different. Tasha wasn't just behind the desk. She had the deed in her hands, the deed to the hotel. Her hotel. It had been her hard work, her refusal to let anyone else define her, that had gotten her here. And with a single press of a button, she could close the deal that would change everything. She would be the one holding the keys now. The keys to the resort. The same place that had mocked her. The same place where she was told she would always be nothing more than a servant. She wasn't supposed to be here, but she was. And with each step she had taken to get here, her vision had grown clearer. The rejection, the doubting looks, the whispers, they had all turned into fuel. Fuel that pushed her past the limits they'd placed on her. You're not allowed to dream that big, they told her. There's no way someone like you will ever own a place like this. That's what they had said when she had first walked in, trying to get a foot in the door. They thought it was cute. A girl from the wrong side of town trying to take a seat at the table. But now, she was the one who held the keys to that very table. Her thoughts were interrupted as the front door opened. A group of guests walked in, laughing and talking about their day. Their voices broke through the stillness like the sudden rush of water after a storm. Tasha straightened up, forcing her mind to focus. "Good evening, welcome," she said, her voice steady, calm. They smiled, greeting her in return, and continued on their way, unaware of the woman who had silently changed their world. Tasha wasn't the type to bask in the glow of her own success. She wasn't interested in proving anyone wrong for the sake of validation. But tonight, at this moment, it felt like her entire life had led her to this. This was the moment she would stand as the owner of what they had said she would never have. The same people who had never believed in her. The same people who had defined her by her skin color and nothing else. Now, she was about to take everything they thought was theirs. She stepped away from the counter, walking towards the office. The sound of her footsteps echoed off the walls, firm, resolute. In the room, behind the desk, she found the final contract. Tasha's fingers brushed over it one last time before she signed her name. Felt good, no, better than good. Felt like a weight lifting off her chest. The weight of every doubt, every slur, every time they had told her she wasn't enough. With one simple movement, she slid the keys to the resort across the desk. The deed was hers, and with that, she knew nothing could stop her now. If the story touched something in you, share your city in the comments. Let's see how far quiet strength travels. The evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow over Charleston's skyline. Tasha sat in the plush leather chair behind her desk, her fingers tracing the rim of the glass sitting before her. She'd always dreamed of having this office, this power, this respect. But now that she had it, the weight of the silence in the room was heavier than she anticipated. The glass, once filled with bourbon, was now empty, but the drink hadn't done what it usually did. It hadn't calmed her nerves, hadn't made the world outside her office seem any softer. She had climbed so high, but all she could feel was the hum of exhaustion. It wasn't the kind of exhaustion you felt after a hard day's work. No, this was the kind of tiredness you felt when you'd been pushing against something far greater than yourself for years, when you realized how much you had to sacrifice to get here. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes drifting across the city skyline. Charleston was different at night, more alive, more hopeful. The lights shimmered, and you could hear the faint clinking of glasses from the restaurants on King Street, the hum of a city that never truly slept. This was where her journey had begun, after all. The same streets that had witnessed her struggle, her pain, and her endless hustle were now the backdrop to her success. But even now, she felt distant from it all. The weight of the life she'd left behind loomed over her. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, a soft but firm reminder of the promises she made to herself all those years ago. "You can't escape where you come from, Tasha," her mother used to say. "But you don't have to live in it forever." Her mother had never been a dreamer. She'd been practical, pragmatic, always telling Tasha to take what was given, to accept the hand she was dealt. But Tasha had always been different. She had always wanted more. More than the tiny apartment on the wrong side of town. More than the same dead-end jobs that had stolen her hope. More than the life of invisibility her family had led for generations. That's why, when her mother first saw her sign the papers for the resort, she was silent. Tasha had expected some kind of reaction, either disbelief or pride. But her mother didn't say anything. She just nodded, as if this moment was inevitable. And maybe it was. Tasha had worked for everything she had. She didn't need anyone's approval, least of all from people who had spent years telling her that she would never belong in rooms like this. But still, something inside her longed for validation. She had worked so hard to prove the world wrong, to carve a place for herself where they thought she didn't belong. She reached for her phone and scrolled through her messages. There were notifications from her team, congratulatory texts, and some from people she hadn't heard from in years. But one text stood out. An old friend from her childhood, Daryl, who had stuck by her through it all. Daryl had always been the first person to believe in her when no one else did. "I knew you could do it. You've always had the fire inside you. Don't let anyone take that from you." The words hit her harder than she expected. It wasn't the first time someone had acknowledged her hard work. But coming from Daryl, someone who had watched her stumble, fall, and get back up again, it carried weight. He was one of the few who understood her journey. Not just the surface-level wins, but the sacrifices, the loneliness, and the hunger that had driven her. Tasha set her phone down, her mind wandering back to those days. The days when she had been nothing but a girl with a dream. She thought about her first job at a fast food restaurant, her first shift as a maid at a local hotel, the late nights studying after hours at the community college, determined to make something of herself. Every step had been a battle, but she had fought with everything she had. And now she was here, standing at the top of something she had built from the ground up. But she couldn't escape the haunting voice inside her head, the voice that still whispered, "They said you wouldn't make it. They said you didn't belong." The sound of the office door creaked open, snapping her back to the present. Her assistant, Rachel, stepped in, a stack of papers in her hand. She had been with Tasha since the beginning, always by her side, helping with the long hours, the endless details, and the never-ending pressure. "You okay?" Rachel asked, her tone soft but concerned. Tasha gave a small smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. I'm fine. Just thinking. Rachel set the papers down on Tasha's desk and took a seat across from her. I get it. This is a big moment. But don't let it overwhelm you. You've earned it. Tasha nodded, but Rachel wasn't wrong. She had earned it. But no matter how much she had achieved, the scars from the past still lingered. She could walk into this hotel as the owner, but she couldn't erase the years of rejection, of being told she would never amount to anything. Those words were still in her bones, still reverberating through every step she took. I'm not sure I know how to be the boss, Rachel, Tasha admitted, her voice barely a whisper. All my life, I've been the one cleaning up after others, taking orders, never getting a seat at the table. Now I'm sitting at the head of it, and it feels too much. What if I mess it up? Rachel smiled gently, her eyes filled with understanding. You've been preparing for this your whole life. You just didn't know it. You're more than capable, Tasha. You've always been more than capable. Tasha wanted to believe her. She really did. But doubts still crept in, biting at her heels. What if they were right all along? What if this was a mistake? Remember the first day you walked into this place? Rachel asked. You walked in like you belonged, even when no one else thought you did. You fought for your seat at the table, and now that you've got it, don't you dare let anyone take it away from you. Tasha looked at Rachel, her voice catching in her throat. But I don't want to be like them. I don't want to become the people who look down on others just because they have more. You won't, Rachel said firmly. You're different. You've always been different. Tasha took a deep breath, feeling the weight of Rachel's words settle in her chest. She was different. She wasn't going to be the person who shut people out, who became the cold, distant boss who only cared about profit. She had been raised on the principles of kindness and humility, of working hard and lifting others up along the way. That was the person she wanted to be, but she still had a long way to go. And that journey, just like everything else, would be full of tests, setbacks, and doubts. But maybe that was the point, to keep pushing forward, no matter how heavy the burden or how harsh the world seemed. Thanks, Rachel, Tasha said softly, her heart a little lighter. I needed to hear that. Rachel smiled. Anytime. Tasha looked out the window once more, her gaze sweeping over the city she had conquered. She had come so far. The journey wasn't over, but she was no longer the girl who had been told she'd never make it. She had something they didn't, something no one could ever take away. She had the keys, and now it was her time to lead. The early morning light spilled over the horizon, creeping slowly into the lobby through the tall glass windows. Charleston's streets were still quiet, save for the faint sound of early risers beginning their day. Tasha stood by the large window, looking out at the world that had never quite seen her the way she saw herself. She had woken up early, too early, and the silence of the hotel had settled around her like a blanket. She loved the quiet of the morning, the way everything felt like it was in its place before the world rushed in with noise. The calm was both comforting and unsettling. She'd spent so many years fighting to be seen, to be noticed. Now, as she stood at the top, the weight of that attention felt different. It was no longer the kind of attention that came from working hard to be heard. It was the kind of attention that felt like a spotlight glaring down, asking her to prove she belonged. Tasha ran her fingers through her hair, pushing the stray strands behind her ear. She had done it. She had built this from nothing, this hotel, this empire, this life. But it wasn't the life she had envisioned when she first started. The glamour of success didn't fit her like she thought it would. Every step she took felt heavy, like it carried the weight of everyone's expectations. Everything's ready for today. Rachel's voice broke through her thoughts, grounding her back in the present. Rachel stood at the door of the office, a notebook in her hands, a clipboard hanging loosely at her side. Tasha nodded, though she felt a pang of uncertainty deep in her chest. There was always something more to be done, always something more to fix. The responsibilities had stacked up since she took ownership. And with every new piece of success, there were 100 new worries she hadn't anticipated. I'm just making sure everything is set, Rachel continued, her voice practical, steady. The new bookings are coming in, and we've got a full house this weekend. Tasha forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. She didn't want to be the one in charge of all this. She didn't want the constant pressure, the anxiety of running a business, of making sure every guest was satisfied, that every detail was perfect. But this was the life she had chosen. And though she'd fought hard to get here, it didn't feel like the victory she imagined. For years, Tasha had told herself that all she needed was an opportunity, a seat at the table, a chance to prove what she was capable of. But now that she had it, she realized something crucial. Success wasn't just about getting to the top. It was about how you stayed there. It was about the people you became along the way. She turned back to the window, watching the city begin to stir. You ever wonder if this is what it's all about? Getting here, then trying to stay on top? Or is it just about the climb? Rachel stepped forward, her hands on her hips. It's about the climb, Tasha. It always will be. But it's also about knowing what you're climbing for. She paused, her expression softening. And knowing who's watching you climb. Tasha turned to face her, feeling something stir in her chest. Who's watching? People are always watching, Rachel replied, her voice a little quieter now. And you've got to be aware of that. Not for the attention, but because they're looking for someone to follow. Someone who doesn't give up. Someone who pushes through no matter what. Tasha swallowed hard, her throat tightening. She had always told herself that success wasn't about the recognition. It was about the work, about making a difference, about leaving a legacy. But it was easy to lose sight of that when the weight of expectations pressed down so heavily on her. The responsibility of being the first black woman to own a resort like this, of being the one who had broken all the rules. They were watching. Everyone was watching, waiting to see if she would succeed or fail. She'd known all her life that people would doubt her. They had told her she wasn't enough, that her skin color, her background, her place in the world would always limit her. But now, as she stood on the other side of that struggle, she realized that she was the one who had to prove them wrong. Not by shoving her success in their faces, but by doing the work. By showing up every single day. Tasha didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to meet everyone's expectations. She just had to be herself. And that's exactly what she was going to do. Rachel, Tasha said, her voice steady but with a new fire behind it. What's next? Rachel smiled, nodding. Next, we take this to the next level. We keep growing, keep improving. And we don't forget where we came from. Not just for us, but for everyone who's been told they can't. Tasha nodded. She was tired, exhausted really, but she knew the work wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The hotel was hers now, but her journey was far from finished. The world would always have something to say, always find a way to try to diminish her. But that was okay. She had learned something along the way. No one could take her worth, her power, from her. Not anymore. The hotel, the guests, the money, it wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the quiet victories she had won over herself. The journey from being the girl who scrubbed floors to the woman who now held the keys to her own empire. That was the true success. Are you ready to get to work? Rachel asked, a knowing smile on her lips. Tasha smiled back, a genuine smile this time. Yeah, let's get to work. And with that, she walked out of her office and into the lobby, the sound of her heels clicking against the marble floor, echoing with each confident step. The world might never stop watching her, but she was ready. She was ready for whatever came next. The sun had risen higher now, casting its golden light over the city, and the resort had fully come to life. Tasha moved through the lobby, greeting guests as she walked past, her steps confident, her gaze steady. But today there was a new layer to her focus, a new responsibility, the weight of not only owning this place, but of changing what it stood for, of making it a place where the past couldn't follow her, and where others could finally see what she had always known was possible. She checked her watch, quickly calculating the time. There was a meeting in 30 minutes, and the staff was expecting her. The local community had begun to take note of her success, and she could feel the growing curiosity that came with it. Charleston was only the beginning. This hotel was just the first piece of something much bigger. Her mind raced with the plans she had to expand. Phoenix, Arizona, where the desert heat matched her ambition. New Orleans, Louisiana, with its vibrant culture that felt as alive as her dreams. And even Chicago, Illinois, where the city lights sparkled like the aspirations of every underdog. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her from her thoughts. She pulled it out, her eyes scanning the message. Great news! We secured the location for the new resort in Phoenix. We're on track. Tasha's heart skipped a beat. Phoenix was a new frontier, a place where no one expected her to succeed, but where she saw possible. Her voice firm, resolute. She had always been a planner, always thought 3 steps ahead. We're going to need a new marketing strategy, and I want to bring in some local artists to help with the design. We can't just build a hotel there. We need to build something that represents that community. Rachel nodded, jotting down notes on her clipboard. Got it. I'll reach out to the contacts we have and start gathering the details. Phoenix. Huh? I like it. Tasha smiled. Phoenix was the perfect symbol of what she had become. A city known for its resilience, its ability to thrive in the harshest conditions. Just like her. But as Tasha moved toward her next meeting, a thought crossed her mind. One she hadn't fully addressed yet. She had risen, yes. But what about those who still had yet to take their first step? What about the people in small towns like Camden, New Jersey, where she had grown up, where there were still whispers about what a girl from the wrong side of town could achieve? How many others were sitting in the same room she had sat in, staring at the same world she had once believed was out of her reach? Hey, Tasha, Rachel said, snapping her out of her thoughts. I've got the team on board for the press release. You're gonna have a lot of eyes on you soon. They're calling you the success story of Charleston. What do you want the headline to say? Tasha paused for a moment, thinking. The words success story had never felt like something she could own. Not in the way the media wanted her to. They wanted a soundbite, something simple that made her feel like a myth. But she wasn't a myth. She was a woman who had fought every inch of the way, who had broken every mold they tried to put her in. And that was what she needed the world to understand. I wanted to say, she was told she was too dark to succeed. Then she proved them wrong. Rachel raised an eyebrow, a small smile curling on her lips. Are you sure about that? Tasha nodded, her gaze intense. I'm sure. They need to understand that this isn't just about the hotel. This is about breaking through all the barriers that have been put up for people like me. And I'm not just a story. I'm proof. It was a bold statement, but it felt right. There was no room for half-truths, for sugarcoating the struggles she had faced. If they wanted to see the real Tasha Carter, the woman who owned the keys to the resort and who was planning to own the future, then this was how they needed to see her. The day went by in a blur. There were meetings with investors, calls with contractors, and a constant stream of messages and emails. She didn't mind it. She thrived on it. Every second felt like a victory. But even in the rush of it all, Tasha couldn't shake the thought that had been lingering in her mind for the last few days. What about those who still didn't believe in themselves? What about the other girls in Camden, or in other towns like it, where dreams were crushed before they ever took flight? There were still so many people who needed to see someone who looked like them doing the impossible. There were still too many who thought success was something reserved for people who had more than they could ever hope for. Tasha was no longer just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every person who had ever been told they couldn't, wouldn't, or shouldn't. She was fighting for the women in places like Atlanta, Georgia, and Dallas, Texas, who were told their dreams were too big to come true. She was fighting for the boys in South Chicago who were told they didn't belong in boardrooms, who didn't have the right to sit at the table. As the day drew to a close, Tasha found herself walking through the hotel lobby once again. But this time, she didn't feel the same unease she had felt earlier. She didn't feel small. She didn't feel like she was pretending. She wasn't playing a role anymore. This was who she was. She wasn't the girl who had cleaned rooms, who had been invisible. She was the woman who owned the hotel, and now she was going to change what it meant to succeed. As she walked past the front desk, she caught sight of the guests milling about, their conversations and laughter filling the air. There was something about the way they looked at her now. It wasn't the same dismissive glance from the past, the one that had lingered whenever she walked into the room. No, now they looked at her as if she belonged, as if she had always belonged. Tasha smiled to herself, the weight of everything she had fought for, everything she had sacrificed, settling into her bones like a quiet, steady rhythm. She wasn't just the woman who had owned the resort. She was the woman who had made a place for herself, and for anyone who needed a reminder that their story wasn't over yet. She wasn't finished. This was just the beginning. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. As the new resort project in Phoenix took shape, Tasha's life grew more and more public. Her name had begun circulating in media outlets across the country, local papers, regional news, even national blogs. They all hailed her as a success story, a black woman who had overcome the odds to own a high-end resort. But Tasha wasn't interested in being a headline. She wasn't interested in the praise. Not really. She was interested in building something that lasted. It wasn't just about the property. It was about creating an experience. Something that reflected her roots, her journey, and her belief in what hard work and perseverance could achieve. She wasn't interested in the flashy allure of wealth. She wanted to give people a place to escape, a space where their worth wasn't defined by the color of their skin or the balance of their bank accounts. But even with all the success, Tasha couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. She had proven the world wrong, but now she found herself questioning everything that had gotten her here. What had she really achieved? Was it the property? Was it the wealth? Or was it something deeper, something that went beyond the business? It was a question that had been echoing in her mind ever since the press began hounding her. People were quick to celebrate the story of a woman who had made it, but few asked what that journey had cost her. They didn't see the sleepless nights, the moments of doubt, the scars that ran deeper than any luxury suite she could ever own. She found herself pacing the lobby again one evening, the weight of it all pressing in on her. The hotel was quiet now, the last of the guests having gone to their rooms for the night. The warm, golden glow from the chandeliers cast long shadows across the marble floors. The lobby had never felt so empty. Tasha paused in front of the massive fireplace, staring at the flames dancing in the hearth. It felt like the fire was consuming her thoughts, devouring every bit of doubt she had. But the flames didn't burn bright enough to push away the nagging feeling that something was still missing. Ms. Carter. She turned to see one of the staff members approaching. A younger man named Keith, who had started working here only a few months ago. He was from New Orleans, but he had come to Charleston seeking a fresh start, much like Tasha had when she was younger. "Everything okay?" Keith asked, a hint of concern in his voice. Tasha forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just thinking." "Thinking about what?" She hesitated. "Just everything. How far I've come. How far I still have to go." Keith nodded, his expression sympathetic. He had no idea what it had taken to get here, no idea what kind of fight had been necessary for her to stand behind this desk. But that was the thing about success, it was often a lonely road. There were few people who truly understood the weight of your journey. "Sometimes it feels like no matter how much I do," she said quietly, "it's never enough. There's always more to prove, always more to climb." Keith paused, looking at her with a steady gaze. "I get it, but I think you're already doing more than enough. You've already proved it. You're here. You've built this place. People look up to you." Tasha laughed softly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "You think so?" "I know so," Keith said. "I've seen it. The way people talk about you. The way you inspire people. Not just because of what you've built, but because of who you are. You don't have to prove anything anymore." His words lingered in the air between them, warm and comforting. But Tasha couldn't quite accept them. How could she? The world was watching, waiting for her to stumble, to fail. She had spent too many years being told she wasn't enough, and now that she was on top, the stakes felt higher than ever. Every decision felt like it carried the weight of not just her success, but the success of every person who had ever been underestimated. Keith's voice interrupted her thoughts. "You don't have to carry that weight alone, you know? We're all in this together. You have a team now. You've already changed everything. Tasha looked at him, her chest tight with emotion. She'd spent so long believing she had to do it all alone, believing she couldn't rely on anyone else. But maybe Keith was right. Maybe she didn't have to shoulder all of this by herself. The truth was, she had been afraid. Afraid that if she let go of the reins, everything she had worked for would slip through her fingers. Afraid that if she leaned on others, they would see her as weak, as someone who wasn't truly capable. But that wasn't true, was it? There was strength in allowing others to help. There was strength in building something together. Tasha had built her empire from the ground up, but the foundation of it all wasn't just about brick and mortar. It was about the people who stood beside her. People like Rachel, like Keith, like the community she was slowly starting to build around her. She wasn't just the woman who owned the resort. She was the woman who could lift others up, who could create space for them to succeed, too. For the first time in a long time, Tasha felt a sense of peace. The pressure didn't feel as suffocating anymore. She didn't need to be perfect. She didn't need to be everything to everyone. She just needed to keep moving forward, one step at a time, with the people who believed in her and the ones she believed in. "I guess you're right," she said finally, her voice softer now. "I've done what I set out to do, and now it's time to build something that lasts, not just for me, but for everyone who thought they couldn't make it." Keith smiled, his eyes bright with admiration. "That's the spirit." Tasha's gaze shifted back to the fire. She had a long road ahead, but for the first time, she felt ready to walk it, not alone, but with the people who mattered most. She turned back to Keith. "Let's get to work then, Keith. There's still a lot to do." As they moved through the lobby, ready to face the day, Tasha's heart felt lighter. The world hadn't stopped watching, but she was finally starting to see herself for what she truly was. Not just a product of her struggles, but a woman who had the power to change the narrative. She had come this far, and now nothing could stop her. The morning was crisp, the sun breaking through the mist that hovered over Charleston like a soft veil. Tasha stood outside the resort, gazing out over the courtyard. It had been months since she'd taken a moment to breathe, a moment to just look at what she had built. The hustle of the past had consumed her. There had always been something else to do, something else to fix, to improve. But now, as she stood there in the quiet, the world felt different, more expansive, as though the journey had shifted in a way she hadn't anticipated. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from her mother. "Are you still making time for yourself, Tasha? Don't lose yourself in all this. You've earned a rest." Tasha smiled softly. Her mother's words were always grounded, practical. Reminders that she was loved and seen, even from miles away. Charleston wasn't just her home. It was her legacy, the place that had witnessed every step of her transformation, from a girl cleaning hotel rooms to the woman who owned one of the most talked about resorts in the country. And now, as her mind floated back to the present, she realized there was something she hadn't fully understood. She had spent so many years thinking that success was the destination, that it was the big moments, the milestones, the contracts signed, the doors opened. But the real truth, one she was only just beginning to understand, was that success wasn't a destination. It was the journey itself, the quiet moments in between, the ones that weren't filled with accolades or loud applause. She pulled up a chair, sinking into the deep cushions outside the lobby, her gaze wandering over the beautifully manicured grounds of the resort. The guests had begun their day, some headed for breakfast, others setting off on tours. It was a familiar scene now, one she had come to expect. But it wasn't the guests or the money that had brought her peace this morning. It was the realization that her success, however defined, didn't have to come at the cost of everything else. A soft voice broke through her reverie. "Tasha." She turned to see Rachel approaching, a cup of coffee in her hand. The younger woman had become more than just her assistant. She was the sister Tasha never had, someone who saw beyond the polished exterior of the resort and understood the internal struggles, the quiet insecurities that Tasha fought to hide. "Morning," Rachel said, sitting beside her. "You look like you're thinking." Tasha chuckled softly, taking the coffee Rachel offered her. "I guess I am. About what? Rachel asked, sipping from her own cup. Everything, Tasha replied, her voice steady but reflective. About how far I've come. About what's next. About the pressure, you know? Rachel raised an eyebrow, a knowing smile crossing her lips. Pressure? What pressure? You've built this empire, Tasha. You're the woman everyone's looking for. Tasha sighed, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. That's the thing, Rachel. I've been so focused on building something for other people that I almost lost sight of why I started this in the first place. I thought it was about proving them wrong. Proving to everyone that someone like me could make it. But now that I'm here, I'm not so sure. Rachel leaned in, her expression softening. You know, Tasha, I've seen how much you've given, how much you've sacrificed to get here. But there's one thing I know for sure. You didn't just do this to prove anyone wrong. You did it for you. You built this place for you because you believed in yourself when no one else did. Tasha's chest tightened, a lump forming in her throat. The world had always told her she wasn't enough, that she would never belong in the rooms where the big decisions were made, that she would always be too dark to succeed in spaces like this. And yet, she had kept pushing forward, even when it seemed impossible. Even when the weight of those doubts threatened to pull her down. I guess I've been so focused on proving them wrong that I forgot to celebrate how far I've come, Tasha admitted quietly. I've been so busy building that I haven't really taken the time to appreciate everything I've accomplished. Rachel reached over, placing a hand on hers. That's the problem with success. We're always looking ahead to what's next. Always thinking that there's something more to do, someone else to impress. But look at what you've built. Look at what you've already achieved. Tasha's eyes shifted from Rachel's face to the hotel in the distance. The sprawling resort, the rooms full of guests, the staff who worked tirelessly to make everything run smoothly. It was all hers. And yet, she still felt a small pang of uncertainty, like something was missing. I feel like I've made it, but I don't know where to go from here, Tasha confessed. I don't know if I'm supposed to keep pushing for more hotels, more cities, or if it's enough to just stop and enjoy what I've built. Rachel smiled softly. You don't have to decide today. Take your time. You've earned the right to pause and reflect. But don't forget, this is your journey. You've made it to this point because you believed in something bigger than yourself. And that's what's going to carry you through whatever comes next. Tasha felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. Rachel was right. She had spent so long proving herself to the world, to the people who didn't believe in her. But now it was time to prove something else. She had to prove that she could live this life for herself, not just for the world that had doubted her. She had to find balance, find joy in the journey, rather than focusing solely on the destination. Thank you, Rachel, Tasha said, her voice filled with emotion. You've been here with me through all of this. I couldn't have done it without you. Rachel smiled, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. You didn't have to do it alone, and you don't have to keep doing it alone. Tasha nodded, feeling the weight of the last few months finally start to ease. She had made it, but now it was time to figure out what came next. Not just for the resort, but for her heart, for the woman she was becoming. She stood up, glancing one last time at the hotel grounds. The journey wasn't over, but the path ahead felt clearer now. It was no longer about proving herself to the world. It was about creating something meaningful, something that would inspire others to believe in themselves too. With a deep breath, Tasha walked back into the resort. This time, she didn't feel the weight of the world on her shoulders. She felt lighter. She felt free. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hotel hallway, a rhythmic beat that seemed to sync with Tasha's growing determination. As she passed the gleaming walls of the newly renovated lobby, she couldn't help but feel a small smile tug at the corners of her mouth. The hotel was buzzing again, like it always did. The guests had checked in, the staff was doing their rounds, and everything was moving at its usual pace. But for the first time in a long time, Tasha wasn't focused on the to-do list, the appointments, or the endless emails waiting for her. She was focused on something else, the quiet, internal growth that had been building up within her. The truth was, The moment she had signed the deed to this hotel, she had unknowingly signed herself into a life she didn't fully understand. For years, she had dreamed of this kind of success, this kind of recognition. But now that she had it, she realized the price she had paid to get here wasn't something anyone talked about. It wasn't just the long hours, the exhaustion, or the stress. It was the mental and emotional toll of constantly proving herself to others, of never feeling like she could simply exist without being tested, without being challenged. Yet, here she was, standing in the middle of this magnificent building she had worked so hard to create. And she was beginning to see the bigger picture, the deeper purpose of all of it. It wasn't about the accolades, the media attention, or the fancy lifestyle. It was about making space for people like her. People who had been overlooked, underestimated, told they weren't enough. Tasha had become the symbol of a dream realized, yes. But now she was more than that. She was a reminder that there was room at the table for anyone who dared to dream. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her back to reality. She pulled it out, scan. Possible. Tasha paused for a moment, her heart swelling with warmth. She had worked hard to get to this point, but there had been a lot of doubt along the way. Not from Mark, but from the people who had raised her, who had looked at her and said, "Maybe you should settle for less." Mark had been her rock, always telling her to push harder, to fight for what was hers. And now, as she stood in the lobby of her hotel, the realization hit her like a wave. She had fought for herself, yes, but she had also fought for every person who had been told their dreams were too big, too impossible. For every girl from Camden, New Jersey, or Detroit, Michigan, or any other city in America who had been dismissed because of the color of their skin, their background, or their financial status. She wasn't just building a resort empire, she was building a legacy. Her mind raced with ideas, possibilities. What would it take to create spaces like this in more cities? Places where the underdog could thrive, where people could see their worth reflected back to them. She'd already proven that it was possible to succeed. But the real work, the deeper mission, was in showing others how to rise up, how to claim their space in a world that was quick to dismiss them. Tasha. She turned to see Rachel standing at the doorway, holding a folder filled with papers. Rachel's face was lit with that familiar, determined energy. Always a step ahead. Always a calm presence amid the chaos. "Hey, Rachel. What's up?" Tasha asked, pulling herself away from her thoughts. "I've got a few things we need to go over," Rachel said, her voice steady but urgent. "We've got some requests from the local press, and I wanted to make sure you're ready for the interview tomorrow." Tasha sighed. She had done a lot of interviews since taking over the resort, but every time she stood in front of the cameras, it was a reminder of just how much more she had to prove. She didn't mind the attention, it came with the territory, but sometimes it felt like she was being scrutinized under a microscope, her every word and action dissected for the public's approval. "I'm ready," Tasha said, though her voice carried a hint of uncertainty. "But, I don't know, Rachel. I've done the interviews, the press tours. It's all getting a bit much." Rachel gave her a sympathetic smile, a knowing look in her eyes. "I get it, but it's part of the job now. You've got to use this moment to tell your story, our story. You've built something amazing and people need to hear about it. Not just the press, but the people who are watching." Tasha nodded. Rachel was right. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the future she was creating, the doors she was opening for those who would follow in her footsteps. It wasn't just about being a business owner. It was about being a trailblazer, someone who inspired others to believe in their own potential. As Rachel handed her the folder, Tasha's gaze fell to the pages. There were interviews scheduled, press conferences, and events. So many things she had to juggle. But for the first time, she didn't feel overwhelmed. She felt ready. Ready to face whatever came her way. Ready to speak up for the people who needed her voice. She turned the page and scanned the details. Then, a thought popped into her head, and her fingers paused on the paper. "You know what, Rachel?" Tasha said, a spark of inspiration lighting up her face. "I think it's time we start something bigger, something that goes beyond just hotels. We need to be creating spaces where people can learn, grow, and connect." Rachel raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you mean?" I'm talking about creating mentorship programs, educational scholarships, and platforms for young entrepreneurs who don't have the same resources. We need to build a network. People who can support each other, who can learn from the mistakes we've made. I want to create a legacy that's about lifting people up. Not just in business, but in life. Rachel's face lit up, her excitement evident. That's an amazing idea, Tasha. That's what people need. You've been given so much, and now you're going to give it back. Tasha's heart swelled with pride as the vision started to take shape. This wasn't just about breaking the glass ceiling. It was about breaking down the walls that had kept people like her from ever stepping foot inside the room. She wasn't just going to own a resort. She was going to own a movement. I'm going to start in Camden, Tasha said, her voice filled with conviction. I'm going to go back to where it all started and show the kids there that anything is possible. I don't want them to just see me as a story. I want them to see me as proof. Rachel's eyes sparkled with admiration. That's the heart of it right there, showing them what's possible. Tasha took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision settle in her bones. She had spent so long fighting for her own success that she hadn't fully realized the power she had to change lives. She wasn't just a businesswoman. She was a catalyst for change, a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever been told they couldn't. She stood up, her resolve hardening. It's time. I'm going to take my story to the kids who need to hear it. I'm going to show them that if I can do it, they can too. Rachel smiled. I'm with you, Tasha, every step of the way. As Tasha walked out of the office, her mind whirling with possibilities, she knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. She wasn't going to stop until she had built something that would outlast her. Something that would keep growing, keep inspiring. Something that would continue to break barriers just like she had. The world might have told her she was too dark to be rich. But now, she was proving that no one could ever define her. Not her skin color, not her background. Not the people who doubted her. She had the keys, and she was going to use them to unlock doors for everyone who had been told they couldn't make it. The following weeks unfolded like a delicate web, each thread a new opportunity, a new challenge, a new step forward. Tasha had found her rhythm again, not just as a business owner, but as an advocate for change. Every day brought a new facet of her vision into focus. The plans for the mentorship program were coming together. The partnerships with local schools were slowly taking root. And the more she leaned into her new role, the more she realized how much she had yet to discover about herself. This journey was no longer just about making a name for herself. It was about making a difference, a shift from personal success to collective success, from personal achievement to community empowerment. Tasha had seen firsthand how a single person could change the trajectory of their life, but now, she was starting to see how one decision, one action, could transform an entire community. She sat in her office one evening, reviewing the proposals for the scholarship fund she had started. There were names and faces attached to each application, young people from places like Camden, Newark, and the Bronx. Places where she had once lived, places where dreams often felt just out of reach. Her heart swelled as she read through the applications. They weren't just seeking scholarships. They were seeking validation. They were seeking permission to dream big, to take a chance, to step into the kind of future Tasha had worked so hard to create. And she realized this was the legacy she had always been searching for. Not the resort, not the fame, but this. This was what it was all for. Tasha leaned back in her chair, staring out the large windows of her office. The sun was setting, painting the sky with hues of pink and orange. The city of Charleston was bathed in a soft glow, but Tasha's thoughts were far from the view. They were in Camden, in Detroit, in every city she had been told she wasn't good enough for. Do you ever stop and just look at how far we've come? Rachel's voice interrupted her thoughts, breaking the silence as she entered the room, a fresh cup of coffee in her hand. Tasha smiled, standing up to meet her. It's hard to stop sometimes. It feels like there's always something more to do. Yeah, Rachel agreed, setting the cup down on Tasha's desk. But sometimes you need to stop, to see the impact you're having. You're not just changing your life anymore. You're changing other people's lives too. And that's a big deal. Tasha's smile faded slightly, her gaze drifting back to the papers in front of her. "I just hope it's enough," she said softly. "I hope I'm doing enough for them." "You are," Rachel said, her voice firm. "I've seen how much you care, how much you've poured into this. And there are kids out there who are going to look at you and think, if she can do it, so can I." Tasha paused, her chest tight with emotion. Rachel was right, of course. She had to believe that the work she was doing was enough, that the change she was creating was real. She had spent so many years thinking she wasn't enough, that she had to do more, prove more. But now, with each scholarship awarded, each young entrepreneur she mentored, she was starting to see that the work itself was the reward. "Thanks, Rachel," Tasha said, her voice soft but genuine. "You've been here every step of the way. I couldn't have done it without you." Rachel smiled warmly, her eyes filled with understanding. "I'm just getting started with you, Tasha." There was a quiet moment between them, an unspoken understanding that the work was far from over. Tasha had built something from nothing, but that was just the beginning. Now, it was time to build something that would outlast her, something that would continue to provide opportunities, to inspire, and to uplift long after she was gone. Her thoughts were interrupted by the phone ringing. Tasha glanced at the caller ID and saw that it was Mark again. He had been calling her more often lately, checking in on her progress and offering his support whenever she needed it. They hadn't always seen eye to eye, especially when it came to her decision to leave Camden and take the leap into the unknown. But now, he was her biggest supporter, always reminding her of what she had accomplished and how far she had come. "Hey, Mark," Tasha answered, smiling as she picked up the phone. "Hey, sis, I was just thinking about you," Mark said, his voice warm. "How's everything going with the new program?" "It's going great," Tasha replied. "We've already had so many applicants, and it's really starting to take off. I'm honestly just in awe of how much support we're getting. I didn't think it would happen this quickly." "That's because you've been working your tail off," Mark said with a laugh. "And you're showing people what's possible. You're making a real impact." "I just hope I'm doing enough," Tasha murmured. "Enough," Mark repeated, his voice filled with conviction. "Tasha, you've done more than enough. You're giving people a chance to dream. You're changing the game, sis. Don't forget that." Tasha felt a lump form in her throat. She had spent so many years doubting herself, so many years wondering if she was enough. But hearing Mark's words, hearing the pride in his voice, made her realize something. She had been enough all along. She didn't need to prove herself to anyone. She just needed to keep doing the work. "Thanks, Mark," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You always know what to say. That's what brothers are for," Mark said with a grin. "Keep pushing, sis. You've got this." As Tasha hung up the phone, she felt a sense of peace settle in her chest. She wasn't done yet. There was so much more to accomplish, so many more people to help. But for the first time, she felt like she was on the right path. She wasn't just proving the doubters wrong. She was proving to herself that she was capable, that she had always been capable. She looked at Rachel, who was already pulling out her next batch of plans and schedules. "Let's keep this momentum going," Tasha said, her voice strong. "Let's keep giving back. This is only the beginning." Rachel smiled, nodding in agreement. "I'm with you every step of the way." And with that, Tasha knew that the journey wasn't just about the resort. It wasn't just about the cities or the success. It was about the people she could help along the way. The people who needed to see what she had built and know that it was possible for them too. Because in the end, Tasha Carter wasn't just building a legacy for herself. She was building a future for everyone who had been told they couldn't. The morning light crept into Tasha's office as she sat at her desk, the weight of the world both on her shoulders and in her heart. It had been a few months since the mentorship program officially launched, and the results were already beginning to show. Young entrepreneurs from across the country were flooding in, eager to learn, grow, and share their own dreams. She hadn't expected the program to take off as quickly as it had, but now she was realizing just how much was at stake, how much she had to give, and how much there was still to build. Tasha glanced out the window, watching the staff arrive, the morning rush settling into place. The resort had become a well-oiled machine, efficient, polished, and seemingly flawless. Yet beneath the surface, she could feel a new kind of challenge brewing. She had risen above the doubters and the naysayers, but now the questions were different. Now they were internal. Was she giving enough? Was her vision truly creating lasting change? The problem wasn't external anymore. It was internal. Her phone buzzed on the desk, snapping her out of her reverie. She checked the screen and saw that it was an incoming call from Sheila, a young woman who had come through her mentorship program just a few weeks ago. Sheila was a single mother from Birmingham, Alabama, who had started her own clothing line after years of working low-paying retail jobs. Tasha had been struck by her resilience, her ability to see beyond the limits others had placed on her. "Hey Sheila, how's everything going?" Tasha answered, her voice warm and welcoming. "Hey Tasha, I just wanted to update you on how everything's going," Sheila said, her voice filled with excitement. "I've been working on expanding my brand, and I just landed a deal with a local boutique here in Birmingham. They want to carry my line in their store. I can't believe it. This is everything I've been working for." Tasha's heart swelled with pride. This was exactly why she had started the program, to create opportunities for people who had been overlooked. She knew that Sheila's success wasn't just about the boutique deal. It was about the possibility that had been unlocked for her, the belief that she could rise above everything that had held her back. "That's amazing, Sheila. I knew you had it in you. This is just the beginning. What's next for you?" Tasha asked, her tone encouraging. "I'm working on creating a larger online presence. I want to reach more people, especially other women like me. You know, the ones who are hustling, who are trying to build something for themselves but feel like it's out of reach. I want to show them that it's possible. That's what this is about, right?" Tasha smiled, her heart swelling at Sheila's words. "Exactly. It's about showing others that they can do it too. You're doing amazing, Sheila. Keep pushing. I'm proud of you." After hanging up the phone, Tasha sat back in her chair, her thoughts swirling. Sheila's story wasn't unique. It was the story of so many people who had been told they weren't enough, that they didn't belong in spaces of power, of success. And now they were rising not just because of the resources they were given, but because someone had believed in them. Someone had seen the potential in them that they couldn't see in themselves. But the journey wasn't just about giving people opportunities. It was about helping them understand that they were already enough, that they didn't need to prove their worth to anyone. Tasha had spent so much of her life trying to prove she was worthy of the spaces she had entered. Now, she realized that the real work was about helping others understand that they were worthy from the start. Tasha's mind drifted to her own journey. She had been the one who was told she didn't belong in the rooms of power, the rooms of business, of influence. She had been the one who had been told she would always be too dark to be rich. But now, as she sat at the head of this thriving empire, she could see that what had brought her here wasn't just grit. It was belief in herself and in the work she was doing for others. She wasn't just changing her life. She was changing the lives of so many others. And that meant something far more significant than success. It meant legacy. Just then, Rachel entered the office, a stack of documents in her hands. "Morning, Tasha. Got a few things for you to look at. Press coverage, updates from the Phoenix team, and the latest numbers for the scholarship fund." "Thanks, Rachel." "Put them on my desk," Tasha said, her voice softer than usual. Rachel placed the papers down and noticed the thoughtful expression on Tasha's face. "What's on your mind?" Tasha leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling for a moment before meeting Rachel's gaze. "You know, sometimes I feel like I've made it. I've proven everyone wrong. But then, there are days when I feel like it's not enough. Like there's something more I'm supposed to be doing. Something bigger." Rachel raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Something bigger than this?" she asked, motioning to the papers on the desk, the success of the resort and everything they had built. "Yeah," Tasha replied, her tone reflective. "I've built this. I've made it. But now it's not just about the resort. It's about the people, about the next generation of leaders, about showing them that they can do this too, that they don't have to struggle alone, that they don't have to fit into the mold that others have set for them. Rachel smiled, her eyes softening with understanding. That's exactly why you're doing all of this, Tasha. You're not just building an empire. You're building a movement. Tasha nodded slowly, her gaze drifting once again to the papers on her desk. The scholarship fund, the mentorship programs, the partnership with local schools, these were all parts of the bigger picture, the long-term vision. She hadn't just created a place for herself. She had created a place for others to rise to. I think it's time we take this to the next level, Tasha said finally, her voice steady with newfound clarity. I want to launch a national campaign to bring more attention to the mentorship program. I want to partner with other organizations and provide resources, opportunities, and connections to people who need them. I want to show them that they don't have to do this alone. They can lean on each other. Rachel's eyes widened with excitement. That's incredible. You're talking about scaling this up, making it national? Tasha nodded. Yes, if we can do this here in Charleston, we can do it anywhere. I want to give people like Sheila a platform, and I want to find others who have the same hunger but don't have the resources or the confidence to take that first step. It's time for us to help them step into their power. The energy in the room shifted as Tasha spoke, her words filled with conviction. She wasn't just planning for the future of the resort anymore. She was planning for the future of everyone who needed a chance, everyone who had been told they weren't. Rachel smiled broadly, clearly inspired by Tasha's words. I'm all in. Let's make it happen. Tasha stood up, her mind already racing with ideas for the campaign. It's time to make our voices heard, Rachel. We've proven that success doesn't belong to just one type of person. And now it's time to show the world what it looks like when everyone gets a seat at the table. With a sense of renewed purpose, Tasha walked to the window, looking out over the resort grounds. The sun had fully risen, and Charleston was alive with the energy of the new day. It was a new chapter, one where the real work began. She wasn't just changing her own life. She was changing the lives of those who needed her belief. And with that, she knew she had built something that would last far beyond herself. The city of Charleston buzzed with a new energy, a hum of excitement that seemed to reverberate from the core of Tasha's very being. She stood by the window of her office, looking out over the sprawling resort grounds. The days had blended together, full of meetings, ideas, and implementation, but today felt different. Today, Tasha wasn't just the woman who owned a resort. She was the woman who was about to start something far bigger than she had ever imagined. As the sun began to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows across the landscape, Tasha couldn't help but think back to the day she had first walked into the hotel as its owner. That moment had been surreal, a dream realized. But now it wasn't enough. She had spent so many years fighting for success, battling against the odds, and proving to the world that she could achieve greatness. But now that she had reached that peak, she realized that it wasn't about how high she could climb. It was about how many people she could lift along the way. She had created something powerful, but it wasn't about the power. It was about the impact. She wanted to create a ripple effect, one that could reach all corners of the country, especially the places where people like her had been overlooked, pushed aside, told they couldn't do it. The young entrepreneurs, the single mothers, the kids who had grown up thinking they didn't have what it took to succeed. Those were the people she wanted to empower. Ready for the meeting? Rachel's voice broke through her thoughts, and Tasha turned to find her standing in the doorway, a file in her hand. Rachel's face radiated the same confidence and energy that Tasha had come to rely on. Yeah, I think so, Tasha replied, her smile genuine. The meeting was crucial. It wasn't just another corporate check-in or a discussion about the resort's future. This meeting was about scaling up the vision that had kept Tasha awake at night. It was about expanding the mentorship program, creating partnerships with organizations across the country, and launching a national campaign that would bring attention to the cause that had become her true calling. Rachel, Tasha began, her voice calm but filled with purpose. This is bigger than anything I've ever done. It's not just about expanding the resort. It's about creating a movement. Rachel smiled, clearly understanding where Tasha's thoughts were leading. A movement for people who haven't had the chance to succeed the way you have. For people who need a seat at the table. Exactly, Tasha said, her eyes lighting up. I want to start a ripple that can't be undone. I want to show them that they don't have to fight alone, that they don't have to be the ones left behind. If I can make it, so can they. Rachel nodded, her eyes reflecting the same determination. You're already doing that, Tasha. But this next step, this national campaign, could change everything. You're going to show the world what's possible when you invest in people who've been overlooked. You're going to give people hope. Tasha smiled, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. She wasn't just the businesswoman who owned a hotel. She was a woman on a mission. And this mission was about far more than success or recognition. It was about the people who had never been given the tools to succeed, who had never been told they could. She had been that person once. Now, she was the one showing others the way forward. The meeting started promptly, with Tasha sitting at the head of the table, flanked by her trusted team, including Rachel. The plans for the national campaign were ambitious, reaching out to schools, community organizations, business leaders, and media outlets. The goal was to make the program as accessible as possible, to ensure that no one who wanted to participate was left out. But beyond the logistics and the numbers, Tasha knew there was one key element that would make this campaign truly successful. The story. Her story wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who had ever been told they couldn't make it. It belonged to the women who had been told they were too dark to succeed. The kids who were raised in environments that taught them to keep their heads down and not aim too high. But now, she was offering them a different story. A story where they didn't have to fit into anyone else's mold, where they could define their own success, just as she had. As the meeting concluded, Tasha stood up, feeling a wave of purpose wash over her. This wasn't the end of the journey. It was just the beginning. The national campaign would take time, it would take resources, and it would take the support of people who believed in what she was doing. But Tasha had something more powerful than resources or influence. She had conviction. I know it's going to take time, she said to her team, her voice steady and filled with emotion. But we can do this. This is bigger than me. This is bigger than this hotel. We're going to change lives. And we're going to prove that success isn't just for the few. It's for everyone who's willing to put in the work. The room was silent for a moment, the weight of her words settling in the air. Then, one by one, her team members nodded, their eyes reflecting the same passion and belief. Tasha turned to Rachel, who was standing beside her, her smile wide. You're right, Rachel said softly. This isn't just about the business anymore. This is about building a legacy that lasts. Tasha took a deep breath, feeling the magnitude of the responsibility that lay ahead. It's time to make a difference, she said, her voice calm but firm. And this time, we're going to make sure everyone who wants a chance gets one. The campaign would take off soon, and Tasha knew that it wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, roadblocks, and setbacks. But she had already been through the toughest battles of her life. She had fought against everything that told her she wasn't enough. And now, she was fighting for the people who had been told the same. As the team began to break down the plans for the campaign, Tasha stepped outside, the cool air of the evening brushing against her skin. The hotel was alive with activity. Staff and guests milling about, the hum of a bustling evening that she had come to love. But it wasn't the busy lobby or the glamorous events that filled her heart now. It was the thought of what was to come, the thought of the many lives she could impact. Her phone buzzed again, but this time, it wasn't an email or a press request. It was a message from her mother. I'm proud of you, Tasha. You've come so far. But don't forget to live too. Take a moment for yourself. You deserve it. Tasha smiled as she read the message, her heart lightening. Her mother had always been there, her quiet strength a constant presence. And now, Tasha was becoming the person her mother had always believed she could be. She typed a quick reply, "Thanks, Mom. I'm doing it. And I'm not stopping." As she hit send, Tasha knew that she wasn't just building an empire. She was building a future. A future where anyone, no matter their background, could dream big and have the tools to make those dreams a reality. She had started with the belief that she was too dark to be rich. Now, she was showing the world that no one could ever define her, and no one should ever have to prove their worth again. Tasha Carter wasn't just changing the world. She was giving others the opportunity to do the same.